So for the purpose of this webinar, I will be covering our alerting capabilities. But before going into that, I wanted to provide a quick introduction into Sentry for some of you who may not be familiar with us already. Sentry consists of 5 main pillars. Firstly, we have error monitoring, where we tell developers that their app is broken. We can give them all the details around their errors, and we even show them the commit that caused the particular problem. Then we have performance monitoring. This is where we don't want to just tell you that your code is broken, but we want to allow you to drill down on that specific code and tell you why it's slow and be able to optimize accordingly. Then we have release health. In release health, we want to give you the release specific information, such as crash-free sessions for mobile. And then we have discover, our 4th pillar, where we give you access to our query engine so you can get the data out of your platform for your particular use cases. And lastly, we have ecosystem or integrations for issue tracking and other needs that you might have. So now, I'll show you a quick overview of the Sentry solution, leaving out alerts for later. So here I have my application. I have Sentry integrated, and you can see I imported the package. So if this was Python, this would be a pip install. For Ruby, gem install. For Node, npm install. Now all you have to do is call Sentry init, where you supply your DSN, which is your unique key associated with your project, and then your errors can be shot up into Sentry. Now I'm going to try to check out, and I will hit an error. Normally, I would be notified of this problem via Slack, email, or some other notification service, but I will showcase alerts for later. For now, I want to jump directly into Sentry and show you the rich context that we provide for your errors, so you can figure out the who, what, where, when, and why of the problems you've encountered. You can see we show you error type, error name, overall customer impact. By aggregating similar errors together, you can see past times this event has flared up. Most relevant to the developer, the stack trace. We can see any of the frames that we want and get all the inline code context, as well as the breadcrumbs showing what happened prior to the error. We can see that there was some sort of request, and then there was an error thrown for this particular example. And it looks like this error is happening on all the various browsers, and it seems like various kind of customers are being affected by this error too. But any tags introduced to your system will produce a heat map so you can understand exactly who is impacted. From here, we can understand exactly what went on if we have any knowledge of this code base. And if not, we point out the commit that caused the problem so we can directly assign the error to the individual that is best equipped to fight this fire while on the job. So far, I have showed you what Sentry provides when troubleshooting your errors, but in terms of being notified of when to use Sentry, that is where alerting comes in. Today, we will be focusing on our first part in a series of Sentry workflow webinars, which will be on alerting. Sentry is made by developers for developers, and as developers, we want to focus on writing great code so we can go back to our favorite hobbies. That means we don't want you just monitoring Sentry for updates. You need to know as soon as something breaks so it can be addressed immediately. Alerting, when properly configured, allows developers to be notified when things are broken and react to them effectively. So Sentry's point of view on alerting is that we want you to discover problems before your users do, before customer support tells you. This is important because software bugs discovered sooner will cost less to the company, both in monetary terms as well as customer experience. Now, let's go through some best practices on how to set up alerts within error monitoring. As you probably know, Sentry groups error events into issues based on their stack trace and other factors. Metric alerts can perform various aggregations on all the events in your project, regardless of which issue they belong to, and tell you when their frequency exceeds or goes below a threshold, while issue alerts tell you about changes in individual issues, such as when a new issue is created. Let's talk about metric alerts first. So I will show now how we create metric alerts here at Sentry and the best practices we recommend. This will consist of going in and showing how an alert is set up, as well as how it would actually look like in Sentry to help us solve for the root cause of the issue. So let's say you're running an e-commerce store like what was shown earlier, and you want to make sure you are identifying any problematic trends that are affecting your entire user base. If it is, you want to quickly get notified of it. To do this, we will go ahead and set up a metric alert. So you can actually set an alert on two forms of event types, errors and transactions. We will come back to transactions later. It's often very useful to alert on the total number of errors in a project. But for now, we'll filter our events down to our highest priority customers experiencing issues with the customer type tag. You can see Sentry provides you some pre-built functions that could be applied to this event data, such as count or unique count. An example of when unique count might be helpful is when a developer might want to alert on the number of unique users being affected by those errors in the filtered data set. This is because you can have a ton of errors being seen by only a couple of users, which is a less important problem than errors being seen by lots of users. Since we want to be notified of the total number of errors, we will leave this on count for now. Furthermore, we will set the time window so this function will be applied over 5 minutes worth of data. You could see here we could specify what environment we want to set this alert in. For now, we will just leave it at all environments. We will now set our thresholds. If we inspect our data thus far, we can see we've actually encountered some unusually high peaks above 20 and above 40 of events. So let's set our critical status to 20, which means the alert will become critical when more than 20 errors are seen in the last 5 minutes. We will set our warning threshold to 10 errors, and the default behavior of resolution is to automatically resolve when the metric goes below the warning threshold. But we'll override it to resolve only when the number of errors goes below 5 in the last 5 minutes. As you can see, Sentry is able to highlight these different thresholds for you. Now we will set an alert action to make sure that when this alert fires, we will be notified accordingly. One cool thing about Sentry's alerts is that we could set up how we get notified based on how severe the problem is. So if the total number of events goes over 20, the critical status will be hit and we'll get notified via our PagerDuty integration. For warning status, we want to be notified via our Slack integration. Now all I need to do is give this alert a name and save it. Now let's look at the same metric alert after it has been sent to our Slack channel. You could see on the metrics alert page, we get a high-level summary of what happened. Things like what environments did the alert originate from, what project it was tied to, and overall users affected. You can also see a high-level summary of the alert itself and what activity or comments have been made already. Now let's use Discover, Sentry's query tool, to figure out what may have been causing this ongoing problem. We will look at the past 24 hours and we can see that Sentry naturally bubbles up the issues that have fired off in the most amount of occurrences in the time range selected. Generally, you'll find that either a single issue is causing the spike or it's coming from multiple issues, which generally indicates a more system-wide problem. If the issue isn't obvious, you can also change the columns you see here to explore further. For example, if the default view of issues is not useful, I can change my view to group by the title of the error events instead. For now, I'll go back to the default view and jump into the first issue where I can verify what was the root cause of the problem. Now let's shift gears and focus on issue alerts. To recap, issue alerts tell you about changes in individual issues, such as when a new issue is created. Every time an event is captured by Sentry, the issue alert rule is checked, and if the conditions are met for the issue corresponding to that event, the alert fires. Let's set up an actual issue alert. Let's say the use case here will be that I want to see a notification whenever an issue is seen 2 or more times in under 1 minute. The reason being that instead of like last time where I want to see any errors related to customer impact, I now want to make sure to screen for any persistent problems that occur frequently in a specified period of time. In this case, it will be for any persistent errors in a new mobile beta release of the earlier e-commerce store example. This alert could be triggered if similar errors are ingested within that short amount of time. As you can observe, a similar interface as we had earlier. We can go in and set our environment. I will leave this to all environments for now. We give it a name, and for conditions, we can see we have some out-of-the-box options here. For example, if the issue is first seen, we can alert on that. Note, if an issue changes state from being ignored to unresolved, we do not automatically send you a notification. So you might want to create an alert using something like the issue changes state from ignored to unresolved condition. For now, I will set up our conditions so that if any event happens to show up 2 times or more within the specified time frame, we should be notified of the problem. We can now apply some optional filters to further cut down the noise. For example, you could filter the alert to issues that are newer than a certain time. This is to avoid getting alerted about old problems you already know about. Next, you'll often find that many issues happen a couple of times and then never happen again. The issue has happened at least X times filter can help prevent those kind of issues from alerting. Additionally, our customers also find the issue is assigned to filter helpful because if an issue is assigned to you, you're probably already aware of it, so you'd want to filter them out. For now, let's go with event is from the latest release filter, which I will use to restrict alerts only to issues that are happening in the latest release. One commonly useful rule is to combine this with the new issue trigger to only alert about issues that were first seen in the latest release. It's recommended that everyone should have at least 2 types of issue alerts in a project. One for when new issues are created and another for when issues spike. That is, when the frequency of an issue exceeds a certain threshold. In the Actions section, we will be taking advantage of another popular way of getting notified of an alert, Sentry's Microsoft Teams integration. I select a team and a channel, and now I will be able to receive the alert within Microsoft Teams. Additionally, to showcase Sentry's issue ownership rules, which was mentioned earlier, I will also set up an action to send out an email. When you select email as the action, the default destination is something called issue owners. Issue owners are rules that tell Sentry who is responsible for an issue based on properties like path, URL, and tags. Think of them as similar to a code owner's file. This feature allows alerts to automatically get routed to the right people. So to recap the difference between triggers and filters, triggers are interesting events you want to know more about. For example, new issues, regressions, or spikes, while filters are things that help you cut down the noise. The action interval sets a rate limit on how many times this particular alert rule can fire for a particular issue. We'll leave this at the default of 30 minutes, which means that once you've been alerted about an issue via this alert rule, you won't be notified of the same issue by the same alert rule for at least another 30 minutes. Now we simply create the alert. Note, organizations that configure at least one alert rule are actually 4 times more likely to successfully triage that issue and 3 times more likely to resolve an issue. So now, looking at the issue alert after it has been fired in Microsoft Teams, you can see that we get the title of the error as well as a brief description of the error itself, with a link to go directly into Sentry to deal with it like we did before, but we also have the ability to resolve it, ignore it, or unassign it. Let's resolve it immediately for now. So that's all for errors. Now let's move on to performance monitoring. Remember earlier when I mentioned there was a transaction event type we can alert on? Well, now we can go over a quick example of how we might go about setting up an alert within performance monitoring. These alerts are set up around things like page loads and service latency requests. Metric alerts for transactions are meant to help you catch problems such as slow code and problematic database queries. Let's say now we're not wanting to be alerted on a particular pattern of errors like before, but now we want to make sure we alert on problematic trends in our transactions. As mentioned earlier, a transaction is an instance of a service being called to support an operation, such as a page load in a front-end context and an API call in the back-end. So let's say I want to be able to identify any long page loads across my user base. I will click on transactions as my data source, and I will filter my transactions to any that have a browser as a tag. You can notice now, once we clicked on the metric option, some interesting function choices become available for us to choose from. These are functions such as latency, aptX, transaction count, and failure rate. Now, if you're not super familiar with these functions, that's okay, because we provide out-of-the-box settings for each one. So for now, let's choose the latency function in order to be able to aggregate our transactions based on our 95th percentile of latency within our project. And let's say I want to evaluate this over a 5-minute time window. Unlike before, I will want to make sure this alert only is applied to events coming from a production environment. Like before, I can set my relevant thresholds, specify my relevant actions based off those thresholds, and assign a rule name, finishing everything off by saving this alert rule. So in summarizing, metric alerts, whether for performance or errors, are best used to monitor a finite and known set of metrics and components you care about. Examples are things like error frequency in your entire project, errors on important pages, or errors for specific tags. Metric alerts are usually higher signal than issue alerts because you know upfront what you're monitoring, while issue alerts power a triage workflow, allowing you to cast a wider net for potential problems and reviewing them as they happen. So now we will cover the last part of this webinar, which is a brief overview of the most useful integrations that Sentry provides when it comes to alerting. You can see we provide pre-built integrations for many of the popular tools that you may already be using, such as Slack, PagerDuty, Opsgenie, and many others. Furthermore, we provide a robust and customizable set of webhooks as part of our broader integrations platform that you can utilize to integrate any tool you might have in your existing workflow using either metric alerting or issue alerting webhooks. Essentially, our integrations platform allows you to create these webhooks to send to their respective custom destinations. Now let's go back to the integrations page and see what information Sentry's webhooks provides us and how to work with our integrations platform. We will be using a free solution called Pipedream to inspect the webhook. So let's go to Organization Settings and click on Developer Settings. This will allow us to create a new internal integration using our webhooks. Once there, we can add our desired name, Webhook Test. We will need to add our webhook endpoint, which I will get from Pipedream. Now, we just need to enable the alert rule actions so we can use this new integration. You can see we can define a JSON-based schema to render a user interface component directly within Sentry's UI. For now, I will skip this, as well as providing an overview and defining any authorized JavaScript origins. For permissions, I will leave everything at default, and additionally, I will not give this integration any ability to create any issues or deal with any issues or errors. After doing this, we just need to go ahead, create a new alert, and now in the Actions section, click on Send a Notification via an integration. You will see our new custom webhook integration is now there. Now let's go ahead, change this to an action interval of 5 minutes, so if an error does occur, we will get a webhook as soon as possible and save the alert. Here are the results of what the webhook tells us. You can see that we're able to receive things about the project name and ID, but also you can inspect the raw body of the event that is being sent, see the culprit of the problem itself, plus any relevant context captured, such as what items were being purchased at the time of the error. So to wrap it all up, we showed you best practices on how to set up alerts within Sentry's first column, error monitoring. Specifically, we showed how to create metric alerts to catch any errors that might be affecting your customers being notified via Slack. Additionally, we then showed how to create issue alerts to alert you on any particular repeating issues that could show up in the beta version of your new mobile e-commerce app being notified in Microsoft Teams. We then moved into performance monitoring, Sentry's second column, and showed what is available in regards to metric alerting to you for you to improve upon your code. And lastly, we went over integrations and our webhooks, showcasing how customizable Sentry's integration platform truly is. Now, back to you, Schaefer.
All right, Adam, thank you very much. We got some questions coming in, so I will go ahead and start getting those answered. The first one, pretty general. What do you have planned for alerts? And I should also make note, we're joined by Adi Somani, who is the product manager for alerts. And of course, Adam is still with us. So I'll toss this question up to either of you all. What do you have planned, or what does Sentry have planned for alerts?
Yeah, I can take this, Adam. So for alerts, we described a couple of different types of alerts, issue alerts and metric alerts. We're going to be making more features available on both of those. So for issue alerts, think about stuff like being able to alert on other indicators of impact that you don't have available. Today, you can get alerted when new issues happen in Sentry or issues start increasing in frequency. We're planning for some percentage-based stuff in the future where you can alert on the percentage of users across your code base that are being affected by an issue. So impact-based stuff over there. In metric alerts, we have a few features coming up that will allow you to alert on more types of tags in your events, as well as apply more functions to it. So you saw count and count unique, but you will be able to apply additional functions like averages and percentiles to not only just your error events, but also some new data that we're collecting on the performance side. And then finally, we are adding features to make it easier to alert around new releases. So when you deploy code, keeping up to date with the help of your latest deployed releases by alerting you only about new issues in that, or around new metrics like crash-free sessions and crash-free users in those releases, particularly for mobile.
Great. Next question. Someone is asking about the filter. This issue is seen more than. They say that doesn't appear on their page. What gives?
Yeah, I could take that. So essentially the filter section of the issue alert rule builder that you saw earlier, is that what the issue is seen more than. It's a relatively new feature of Sentry Alerts, and we recently rolled it out to our users. So there's around two cases in which you cannot see this. Either your project has not received this feature yet due to conflicting alert rules, or you're running Sentry on premise. So either way, you can expect to receive these features within the next couple of weeks. One note here, new projects on Sentry's cloud service should have the new issue alert filters. So make sure to check out that.
Great. I think that answers this next question. I'll ask it anyway. When will we get these new features?
Yeah, I guess I could take that one too then, since it's related. So yeah, as mentioned earlier, for the most part, all users should have the features demoed today. If your project doesn't show the new filters in the issue alert rule builder, you could always create a new project to confirm that you have access to them. If you don't, happy to, if you want to email us, happy to take that offline and help troubleshoot.
Cool. Next question, is there any limitations as to the number of alert rules we can have?
No.
Cool, that's great. Next is monitoring compatible with Heroku infrastructure.
Adiraj might be able to add to this. But
yeah, I can take this, Adam. So we do have a Heroku integration, which does a few things. One, you can actually manage your billing and other things from Heroku itself as an add-on or a plugin from the Heroku marketplace. The other thing we make it easier is for you to send in releases to Sentry, so you don't have to use the API or the release infrastructure we've built. It's just a plugin that makes it so that every time you deploy, we capture details of the release. In terms of alerting, there is no special alerting for Heroku infrastructure, but all of the alerts that we have can be equally applied to any of the code running there. There's no restrictions on that.
Great. What version of Sentry were you using for the demo?
Yeah. So Adam, I can take this as well. The demo was being run on the cloud hosted, the SaaS version of Sentry, which is constantly updating several times a day. In terms of the open source release, the latest one right now is 20.9.0, and these features have been released after that version. So any version that comes out next after 20.9.0 on the open source version will have these features.
Great. Next question. Do you plan alerts based on features rather than specific lines of code? For instance, I want to monitor a specific URL. I get the tag feature, but I don't want to tag every single URL controller in my code base.
So I'm not actually sure what features refers to over here. So if you'd like to clarify your question, maybe you can repost it on the chat. But if you're talking about the inbuilt URLs that Sentry collects, they are actually available as tags without you having to do any additional work on the client side to instrument those things. You can use our Discover feature to actually search for errors or transactions happening on these URLs. And from Discover, we have a button called Create Alert that takes all that information and makes it easy for you to create a metric alert on them, which could be useful.
Cool. If the person who asked that, if that didn't answer your question, feel free to add more context or additional questions, and we'll come back to it in a bit. Next, when will this be available for the SaaS version, and when will this be available for the on-prem version? Looks like we've already answered that. Anything to add there? I think we've already covered that, but.
Nope, nothing to add.
Okay. As mentioned before, virtually all users on Sentry SaaS should have access to the features demoed today. Oh, sorry, I'm reading the wrong question. Next question. Okay. On our on-premise, on clicking create alerts, we are not seeing metric alerts. Is it available on-premise? I think we've already covered that too, but Adi, anything to add there?
Yeah, I'll just add that currently metric alerts are not working for on-prem users, but that is on our roadmap and we'll be working on it soon.
Great. For owners, only emails work. Can an owner be alerted via Slack? For my use case, if team is an owner, alert team's Slack channel.
Yeah, so again, good question. Owners currently only works with emails, but again, this is something that we've heard a lot of requests for and we'll be working on in the near future so that all of the owner-based alerts can go to the same channels and integrations that you use for specific alerts.
Great. Is it possible to build custom dashboards on top of Sentry's performance dashboard?
I could take this, and then if Adi, you want to add to it, but yeah, so the Discover tool that I was showing earlier is essentially you can query for any information, and in that case, any relevant performance information that you would want to create a dashboard out of, you would be able to create that dashboard querying for that information in Discover.
Cool. Next question. Any existing resources you could point us to, whether you created them or elsewhere on the web, that makes a bad issue alert versus an effective one? On what makes a bad issue alert versus an effective one?
Yeah, I can take this one. So what we found is that bad issue alerts are those that are typically very noisy. And those fall into a few categories. One of them is things that you already know about that you keep getting alerted over and over again. So to address that, we've added some new filters that you may have seen in today's webinar around filtering of those alerts to only issues that are new. So you can say if an issue has started happening in the last week, only then alert me about it, or issues that are only happening in the latest release, which is a lot of times the only thing that you care about, or issues that are assigned to a specific member of your team or your entire team. In a multi-team scenario, you'll see that a lot of issues belong to other teams that are not relevant to you, and that creates a lot of noise. So those are the reasons we added those filters. And because these filters are new, we don't yet have a set of best practices, but everything you saw in this webinar will actually be available in written form on our documentation site in about 2 or 3 weeks. So you should find more detailed descriptions of how to create good alerts on the docs.
Great. Moving along, we get issues in Sentry that are mostly the same URL except for a unique ID in the URL. Because of the unique ID, we get several issues in Sentry that are really the same issue. How can we change our configuration to have these show up as the same issues so that we don't have to manually merge them?
Yeah, so the way Sentry does grouping, we have a default algorithm that we use, but it's also pretty customizable based on custom fingerprinting rules. So these are rules that you can either set on your client in the code, or we have a server-side version as well, so you don't have to make any code changes to apply these rules. Together, these sets of rules allow you to customize to a large degree how events get grouped into issues. So we can post it on the Q&A channel, a link to those fingerprinting rules, and I think that'll be very useful.
Great. We can also follow up with you after with just an email explaining that as well. Next, are there any plans to add Rally integration for automatic ticket generation from events?
Yeah, so this is something that we're working on right now, not specifically Rally, but in this quarter at least, we're working on automatic ticket generation in Jira. And I imagine that once we have that in place, adding other integrations, support for other integrations like Rally will be on their way soon after that.
Thank you. Cool. Okay, a couple more. Having errors on specific lines of code is great, but we'd rather want to have some kind of alerts based on features that we ship. For instance, 11% of your users have an issue with this feature. Here are the errors related to this feature. Is that something that is in the works or is we're able to do now?
I don't think we have really great out-of-the-box support for stuff like that. Traditionally, our answer has been to send this data around features as tags, because tags unlock a lot of powerful things with respect to alerting. So yeah, short answer is we don't have this right now, but it's something that we'll keep in mind, because one thing that we've heard from users is they want to alert on software the way they think about it, which seems to be what I'm hearing from this question as well, more around features and less around code. So we're definitely thinking of it. We don't have a great solution right now except tags, but you can expect to see some development here.
Cool. Any best practices or consideration when integrating with AWS Lambda?
Yeah, so as of now, again, short answer is nothing special yet, but Sentry is working on overhauling and revamping our integrations with AWS Lambda in a pretty meaningful way this quarter and next quarter. So when it comes to alerting, you can see changes layered on top of those those improvements that we've made in the last quarter and in the current quarter on serverless.
Got it. Thank you. It looks like one more question. I want to scan the Q&A channel one more time to see if I missed anything. If we want to run the on-prem Sentry, is any data sent to Sentry central or third parties?
Yeah, for this, I think we have pretty extensive documentation on what data we send from on-prem to the cloud-hosted version. The short answer is really minimal, almost none. If we do anything, it's probably just for diagnostic purposes. But if you wanna know exactly what data we send, then I'm sure it's documented and we can link you to the docs.
Cool. Yeah, there was another question about our security policy. So we'll follow up with those folks asking about the security questions with links directly to the documentation or answers to your specific questions. Okay, I think, just do one more scan. I think we've covered all the questions unless anything is coming in last minute here. Thank you all for attending. Let's see, actually, we do have a couple more coming in. Sorry, let me ask these last couple of questions and then we'll wrap up. On-premise for Sentry Run, is there any licensing available for enterprise support?
I'm actually not sure of this one, so we'll have to get back to you on this.
Cool. I heard you answer something about new filters to make it possible to find Sentry issues that are from components from our team and not other teams' components. Okay, this person is also interested in that level of documentation. We'll make sure you get it. Is there any plans to offer custom tags from the UI in Sentry?
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong. Please post a follow-up question. I imagine you're referring to being able to label Sentry issues from the UI manually. We have played around with that idea a little bit. I know that it's something a lot of users have asked for, and we're still in experimental mode with it. We don't have any concrete plans right now, but we're definitely looking into it.
That's exactly what the question asker wanted to know. So we're good there. Great. That's all. Thank you all for joining. Again, sorry that some of you were experiencing some video quality issues. We'll make sure to that recording that we send out next week is crystal clear. And again, after this webinar ends, there's just like a quick 2-question survey. Would love your feedback on future topics that you're interested in learning more about so that we can make a great experience for you. Thank you all again for joining us. We'll see you next time. Have a good rest of your week and weekend.